Welcome to The Local Lens, the podcast that brings the South Dakota community together. I'm Jamie Forrest, your host and your local realtor, here to showcase what makes our region a fantastic place to live. Join me as we explore vibrant local culture, highlight community events, and provide valuable insights for homeowners. Whether you're a current resident or considering a move, The Local Lens is your go-to source for everything in South Dakota. Let's discover, connect, and thrive together. Welcome to the show. Welcome. I am Jamie Forrest with The Local Lens. I'm excited to introduce my next guest. We have Tony Bachman here, who is a licensed real estate agent from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, with the Tony Bachman Group with Coldwell Banker. He has been in the industry over 15 years with over 300 homes sold just in the last 5 years, and he said about 1,800 homes sold since he started. So that is super impressive. Those are some goals that I'm going to set for myself for sure. He is also very active in the community along with his busy real estate schedule. He is part of the Freemasons and also a member of the Shriners for over 20 years. So exciting. I love the Shriners, and they do put on a great circus for us every year. So he also enjoys time with his family, his pets, riding motorcycles, and running a chainsaw. I can't wait to hear about that. So welcome to The Local Lens, Tony.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me come on your podcast. I love it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for being here. So let's just start with something basic here. So just tell me about what is your real estate story and kind of what led you to become a broker or an owner, which is more responsibility, with Coldwell Banker.
Yeah. So I started late. I didn't get into the business till I was about 44. And I had a real good friend of mine that had been asking me to come into real estate. And at the time I was like, I don't know if I'm really interested. And then one day he come over and said, hey, really would love to have you come into real estate. And I finally just said, okay, let's do this. Well, that was in May of 2008. And we all know what happened in the summer of 2008.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so my claim to fame is I received my license the third Friday in September. And on the third Sunday in September, the headlines of the local paper said, real estate at all-time low. I just got my license 2 days before that. And I turned to my wife and said, look, honey, I got into real estate just at the right time. It can't go anywhere but up. It's at its all-time low. But, I firmly believe I've been in customer service and sales and that sort of thing through much of my life and involved with that. So I just know that people always have to move. People always they want to buy, they don't want to rent. And so we just have to figure out ways to make that happen.
And so what led you to want to be like the owner of a company? How did that come about?
Well, so I'll back up a little bit and say, I have had a lot of transactions and I've had a fair amount of success. And I think, but a lot of that has to do with, I had some really good mentors that helped me when I was getting started in the business. And that's the other thing I give for advice to anybody who's looking at this business is always be listening to some of your fellow counterparts and what's going on and some of their transactions and how they handle certain things. And so I just got to a point in the business where I had a large team and then just was thinking maybe I should try, brokerage. So we started out as Coldwell Banker, Tony Bachman Group. We've now gone to Coldwell Banker Empire Realty. So, and the reason for that is that I wanted my agents to have their own identity as opposed to them having an identity under my name and my group.
Makes sense. So you said you were working another career before, obviously in sales too. So what was the driving factor that really made you switch careers? Because as we talked before, I had the same thing where I had another career up until a similar age and then switched paths as well. So what was the driving force? If anybody's out there thinking of maybe a career change.
Well, maybe it was divine intervention to a certain degree. I had been a sales manager for a company and I'd been with them for about 14 years and decided I was just going to go out on my own and start my own business. And I started a print brokerage. So I was doing design work and we had a print business and it's still out running, but I've passed it along I had a cousin that was working with me as a designer. So I passed it on to him. But what really was the impetus that made this happen was I had a large print order that I had a company that had ordered it. They had proofed it. There was something wrong with the order, not on my fault, but something that they didn't correct when they were proofing. Then the company said, well, we're not gonna pay for it. You just need to reorder it. And
Mm,
we did get that all worked out, but it
yeah.
was just enough to make me say, you know what? I have a real good friend of mine who's been asking me to come into real estate for, he actually was asking me for a couple of years because I don't know if it's my skill set or my experience. My dad was a jack of all trades growing up. So I've crawled through attics. I've crawled underneath porches. I've strung wire. We did plumbing. We replaced windows. We replaced siding, did roofing and all that. So I had a fairly good working knowledge of kind of what it takes and what to be looking for and that sort of thing. So that was, I think, probably was a big helpful thing. And I think since then, I didn't like it when I was a kid because I was always busy helping my dad because all my friends were out playing. But since then, I've said to my dad, hey, all I can tell you is thank you because the invaluable experience I received doing that is allowed me to help my clients and then also help my agents. But to address a little bit about the whole thing of why the brokerage is I love the idea of helping others and helping them progress their career, basically feed their families. And so there's a lot of satisfaction with that.
Awesome. Awesome. I like it. And we have more in common in our childhood than we knew. That sounds like my childhood growing
Yeah,
up.
we were just talking about you said that your dad had basically rehabbed a house and you were right there with it.
Yep, I didn't get to go play with my friends on the weekends either. I was, yeah. Now, who knows what? Tarring walls, pounded nails, all that
Yeah,
stuff.
plaster,
Yeah.
laugh, all
Oh,
that
yeah.
fun stuff.
That was nice and dirty for sure. But we
Yep.
found some cool treasures. When you're rehabbing a house like that, you find some cool treasures. So that's always fun.
Yep. Yeah, that,
But
that that newspaper article from
mhm.
1940 or wherever.
Yeah, very cool. So you yourself probably own a home, I would assume. So how does your experience as a homeowner influence your approach to working with buyers, sellers, landlords, tenants, all those clients that we might have?
Yeah, I think you come into the equation like for me and kind of what I talk to my team about is you want to make sure people are making the right decisions for the right reasons. I mean, it's a big deal, right? This is one of the largest assets that most people will have in their lives. And you want to make sure that when they do buy that home, they're not buying something that all of a sudden turns into that money pit, right? Where all of a sudden every month there's something else that they got to put money toward and they can never seem to get ahead. Now, if you're walking into it with your eyes wide open and you know that those things will need to be done, well, then by all means, and they're still interested, then we're going to go get it. But I think when you have a lot of first time home buyers, a lot of times they don't have a grasp of what it takes to do some of these things or what the
Mhm.
cost might be to do some
Mhm.
of those. And so when you kind of have a feeling we can lay that out for them and they can say, maybe this isn't for me, or yeah, let's go. I like it.
Yep,
I
I
look
got a
forward to
cousin
it.
that can do that, or my dad can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep, being transparent. I know sometimes I feel that way too, that I'm pointing out negatives. I'm like, I'm not trying to point out the negatives. I'm just trying to let you guys know that, hey, this roof will need to be done in the next 5 years, or being transparent is very important with your clients. And
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And
It's
as
our fiduciary
homeowner,
duty to make sure that we're giving them as much information as possible to make a educated decision.
100%. Okay, so we all know there's a lot of things that's been going on in the market, especially in these last 3 years. Things have really shifted completely. So why don't you discuss a little bit about some of the unique needs and challenges that buyers and sellers face today in the real estate market that you've observed in Sioux Falls?
I think one of the biggest things we'll touch on is, of course, purchasing power. Interest rates have eroded some of that for a lot of buyers and made it really hard for them to be able to perform and get the home that they really want. I mean, yes, they can qualify for a certain amount, but when they look at that, now are we buying something that, again, now we're back to that conversation of something that's going to be a problem from them financially down the road?
Mhm.
Or, so there's a little bit of that, but it sounds like the tea leaves when you're listening to what's happening. And I know some of the comments have been made just last week by the Federal Reserve. I think we're going to start to see some of that come down, which will help. And even like a 0.5% of interest has a huge
What I
impact
saw from
on.
like last Friday to this Monday and some local things, it went down 0.5% around here. So that was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that, and there's plenty of people that have been on the sidelines that have just been waiting because they just know that if it drops a half or a full percent,
Mhm.
they've increased like if it's a full percent, they've increased their purchasing power by approximately 10%, which
Mhm.
is the difference. It makes a big difference.
Oh, 100%. how important is it for buyers and sellers to understand the local market trends? And where should they go for reliable information? With the
Sure.
internet nowadays, everybody's an expert, right?
And I think there's a lot of information that's out there. Consumers today have the ability at their fingertips. If they do some digging, they can get some information. The thing that's probably the limitation for some of them, and I'm not saying everyone, I'm just saying for a lot, is how do you make all of these things dovetail so that way you can make sense of what's happening in the market? And so I'm a big advocate of knowing your stats, knowing your market, knowing what's happened from month to month, because again, now it's our responsibility to make sure that we're informing our buyers and sellers of what's going on as at a high level as we possibly can. So I know that when our market report comes out on a monthly basis, I go through everything. I sit down with the team and we have a team meeting and we just go through all the stats. And then I try to give everybody a certain amount of talking points that they can kind of just feel comfortable in their own skin. Especially, I always give this example. It's like, so you're in line at a grocery store and someone sees you're with a realty company or they happen to know you, through friends. And they say, hey, how's the market? What's happening with interest rates? Is this a good time to buy? Is this a good time to sell? The answer has to be based on facts of what's happening out there. And as opposed to, it's pretty good. Oh, no, it's really good. Well, what does that really mean to anybody, So
Right.
what I think I always tell my team is I'm always saying, what you want is you want people when you're having a conversation, they're actually leaning into the conversation, right? I mean, they're asking more questions and how does that impact them? And then it's my responsibility to say, so are you thinking about selling your current home? Are you looking to buy your first home? Are you looking for investment property? And then from there we can and sometimes those conversations go pretty quickly, right? I mean, you'll have a conversation and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we'd like to get this listed or we'd like to go buy that house. And it happens within a matter of days or weeks. Sometimes you're working with people for it may be a year or 2 years because they're just waiting for that right house or they're waiting for the right conditions financially to be able to perform. So I had one of my mentors, one of the best words of advice, because he'd been in the business for about 35 years. His name was Gary Molson, was just a very accomplished realtor in the Sioux Falls area. And he says, here's the best analogy I can give you is he said, what you want to do is you just think of all the people you talk to as marbles that you're dropping in a funnel. And he says, you want to drop as many marbles in that funnel as you possibly can. And it takes a little time to develop it. But the amazing part is after a while, those marbles that are in that funnel will start dropping through. And be careful what you wish for, because there might be 3 or 4 or 5 marbles that drop in a matter of a day or two. Right. And I've been fortunate, knock on wood, I live a charmed life, but that's how my last month has been. I think I've taken somewhere close to 12 listings in the last 3 weeks. And I just got I got 2 calls today where people want to list, do some transactions. And of course, I'm leaving on vacation Wednesday morning. Happens. And that's the other part about real estate where we say, hey, if you want to get busy in real estate, plan a vacation, because invariably, man, they just phone calls start coming, inquiries. And again, not complaining. It's just the wacky business that we're in. Real estate is a really interesting business to be in. And I love it because it's fast paced. No 2 days are alike. Yeah. And, but I also know it's not for everyone.
Yeah, completely. So you say, obviously you do a monthly market report. What are the current trends that you're seeing right now in the Sioux Falls area for real estate?
So earlier this year, I mean, when we started out 2024 seemed to be coming on really good. I mean, we had some strong access. We've had some strong activity in the business in reference to closed sales, pending sales. New listings were steady. We're always a little bit behind in our marketplace, and maybe like yours, inventory levels aren't as high as they probably could be. I think our months of inventory is still like in 3s and 4s, 3 to 4 months of inventory, which is still considered a seller's market. Once you get to that 5 to 6 months or more of inventory, then it becomes they say the 5 to 6 months of inventory is like a neutral market. So you have, or you just kind of have both buyers and sellers have kind of a commonality where there's no really big leverage there. Versus when you get into that marketplace so I gave an example of this on the radio today because I do radio anywhere from 2 to 3 times a month with Bill Zortman, who has a radio show, and we talk about what's happening in the marketplace. But in 2000, there was like 10.9 months of inventory when it came to the national market. Our current national market is 4.1 months of inventory. Wow. And then the other things that we talk about was why there's not going to be a market crash, because number one, the inventory is way down from where it was. And then also the other part is that when you're talking about foreclosures or distressed homes, we're still at like record low number of foreclosures.
Well, it's a lot tighter to get a loan. Like they used to kind of just give loans away if you gave them their social security number. Like before the last crash.
That's what caused the crash. Yeah, that's what caused it, because people were, able to get loans for more than what they were approved for, more than they should have been. And then they'd buy a home for like $250,000, but then they would still be able to get like an extra $25,000 or something. Well, that doesn't size up. I mean, and at the end of the day, what happens is you have these people who owe $275,000 and their house is maybe worth $250,000. But in the meantime, a job change, life change, you go to sell, you're upside down.
Yeah.
And that's where all those foreclosures came into place.
We talked a little bit about the past, where it was, where we're at now. So where do you see it going? Where do you see the market going in South Dakota in the next few years?
I think we're in a good spot. I mean, we've always been kind of insulated from the highs and lows. When you talk about like some of the larger metropolitan areas, East Coast, West Coast, and some of those areas, they always see these big swings. I mean, when I say big swings, I'll even use Minneapolis, for example. Back in 2008 to 2012, there were some of those properties that were seeing like a 30% reduction in value. And here we experienced about 5, which 5 is significant, but nowhere near what some of these other metropolitan areas. Mm-hmm. And I think that it seems like in our Midwest, we have that. But as a whole right now, I think with the prospect of interest rates potentially coming down, and of course, inventory is still not where it should be. I mean, it's still a little low. So here we are, this conversation about supply and demand.
Right.
Our demand is still really high compared to the supply. So even when it comes to people saying, well, I think I want to wait until prices drop or there's going to be a crash, it ain't going to happen. There is no crash about it at this point,
Yeah, no, we are up like 3 years ago. We were like below 1 for our months of inventory. Now we're in the 2s, which is still not a lot around here. And when I'm a numbers nerd too. So when I did June's numbers, June last year to June this year, we were down like 3.18%. So that's right. For the state of South Dakota, I guess that's kind of right in the ball game where we're at.
And you've seen that too. We started out real strong in 2024. And then about mid-May, we saw a couple little incremental bumps in the interest rate. Well, then all of a sudden, we started to see a little bit of traffic start to taper off a little bit. Yeah. And then we had a phenomenal amount of rain in June for our area. I mean, I think we had like somewhere around 10 to 12 inches of rain. Mm-hmm. And not too far from us, they had like 18 inches of rain. And it was over a process of a week and a half, 2 weeks. When you have that much rain and that going on, a lot of times, a lot of people decided, well, we're not going to go out shopping, or we're not going to go to the open house or something like that. So we did see things slow down a little bit when it came to closed sales, pending sales, new listings. But in July is traditionally a slower month for us. I mean, it's kind of like that seasonal thing. We're back to a little bit of seasonality with our marketplace.
Even though, a fun tip though, guys out there, going to look at houses in the rain is the best time you can go look at houses, because you could really find out how the water settles against the foundation, if it's going to be leaking in the roof or the foundation, and you can see things. So actually going to look at houses in the rain, even though you might not want to go out, it's the best time for you to do it. So, all right. Absolutely. Well, as long as we're giving tips, why don't you give like a couple of your top tips for like first-time home buyers or sellers, like to make the essential steps to make those educated decisions? Like, what are some of your best tips that you give your clients?
So of course, number one, we want them to go and talk to a lender, a qualified lender. So that way they can get pre-approved, and then they can figure out exactly where they're at financially. I never want anyone to be house rich and cash poor. That's such a stressful way to live for people. And so once because even if they're approved for like 300,000, but when they start looking at their budget, they might be more comfortable with something around 250. Mm-hmm. Well, once they tell me that, we're going to honor that at a high level. We're not going to say, well, there's this other one here at 285 that is really nice. If they tell me they want to go there, that's fine. The big thing is stay within the budget. And we do our buyer consultation where we sit down, we say, okay, based on where you want to live, what are some of the characteristics of your home that you want? And let's just say there's a checklist of 10 items and we find a home that checks 7 of those boxes. Don't ignore that, because I don't know if there's ever like a perfect, where all the boxes are checked, right?
Yeah, no, not typically, I wouldn't say.
And like here, I mean, a lot of times we got school districts. Where do people want their kids to go to school? Do they want them to go to a small town? Do they want them to be able to go to a larger metropolitan area, or like Sioux Falls schools, that sort of thing? The other thing is, when it comes to what you're looking for, trying to help people buy, is it going to fit their family? It may fit their family like right now, but what happens if they have another child, type of thing, because they're still thinking that. So we kind of ask some of those questions just to make sure that we're trying to advise them at a high level. And we sit down with our consultation. And I think with a lot of people, I mean, I'm sure with a lot of agents, you sit down and say, based on your criteria, we pull up the MLS and say, here's everything that's currently active. Here's some of the things that have sold and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So I think it really helps the process, because instead of going out because there was a day, I mean, when we first got started, I had one client that they had to sell their house before they could buy, but they wanted to go out and take a look at homes. Well, I was new to the business. I'm like, I got nothing better to do. Let's go out and look at homes. I showed them, I had a file folder that was just about 2 inches thick. We went and looked at 160 some homes.
Wow. Oh, wow.
For them. But I think it was invaluable. And I make a strong recommendation to anybody who's an agent. Get out there and take a look at homes. Even if you don't have an agent that you're working with, get out there and start looking at some of these. If nothing else, just look at some of the vacant homes, look at the new construction, check out some of the neighborhoods. Because back to this conversation where you're sitting at a grocery store and you're having this conversation and someone says, what we're looking for is we'd like to find a house that maybe has like a mother-in-law suite or a second kitchen. I happen to have, after I was out looking at those 165 homes, I was sitting in an open house and I had someone I didn't know. They just said, we really like this house, but we're really looking for something with a second kitchen. I said, I have it. I know exactly what one. So right after the open house, we set up and we went and looked at that.
Nice.
And they're like, perfect, let's do this, But again, it's being prepared, trying to have as much information as possible so that you can make sense to people who are definitely looking. They want some information so they can make an educated decision.
How about for sellers in particular? I know that's something that was like, what should I do to my house? Or, to get the most money, the most return. What is your number one tip for sellers?
Well, I think that when people are out looking at your houses, number one is trying to at least make your home as decluttered as possible within reason. I mean, you still want to be able to live in your home like you normally do, right? You still have to come and go. You still have to be able to function. But sometimes when you get into like closets and spaces in their house, well, they just have a lot of extra things. So we just kind of give them a little counsel and say, maybe you might want to, maybe you don't need all 4 seasons of clothes in your closet right now. It'd be nice just to maybe pare that down a little bit, because it's amazing how the perception is everything. I remember one house that I had someone who had like a 17x8 walk-in closet that just had racks, rows. And I'd mentioned to him when we were listening, I said, I know this is a big closet, but maybe you might want to take some of that. Oh, they'll get it. They'll understand it's a big closet. I'm like, okay. Well, first open house, I had 2 comments. I don't know, that closet. I mean, it's big, but I don't know if it's going to fit me, what I need. When I told them that, they immediately went through, cleaned out all the extra stuff that they didn't need in there. And we never had that. Ended up selling the house and never had that concern again. Never had that objection.
Absolutely.
But along with decluttering, it's all about first impressions. I mean, when you walk up to the house, what's the landscaping look like? What is even some of the exterior? I'm not telling you have to repaint the house, but if you got flaking paint that's just hanging, let's just scrape that and let's touch it up.
It could be an issue anyway, depending on loan type. So let's just get it taken care of right now.
Yeah, it'll come back a lot of times with VA and FHA financing. They require that those things are done. So, and I also say, if we can spend $1,000 and it basically gives us about $3,000 to $5,000 worth of value, then let's spend $1,000.
Mhm.
But if we're going to spend $1,000 and it doesn't really increase the value, then is it going to help us with our first impressions? Right.
Absolutely. All right, just a couple more questions here. So, what advice would you give to new real estate agents out there entering the industry today, especially in the South Dakota market here?
Yeah. Well, I think so with the South Dakota market, actually, I would just say that this advice probably goes kind of, with anybody in any market is real estate is an interesting business. I mean, real estate is one that you have to have uh, multiple talents, and there's 100 ways to do real estate. You just have to figure out what works for you, right? I mean, you have to know what your strengths are, and then also know what your weaknesses are. Play to your strengths, and then also try to work on your weaknesses or leverage someone on your team that can help you take care of some of those. And I think that and real estate it's a tough, I think contrary to what a lot of people think, it's not that easy of a business. I mean, and when I say that, I'm not like trying to be self uh, or congratulate us for being people that are tough. It's just that you have to have the mental tenacity to stick with it because there are days where everything goes smoothly. And then you have days where it's like, what just happened? Because this thing had to be fixed. That
Yeah.
thing was wrong, or this loan got denied, or this deal decided to go sideways. As long as I know that I've done everything that I can do, some of these things you don't have control over. But I think one of the last things I'd heard here just recently is 10 people, right now, 10 people can take the real estate test. 6 people will pass. After the first year, 3 people are still involved. And after the second year, 1 person is still involved. It's changed that much as of late. I mean, and that's where being a broker and being someone who's a leader of the office trying to help, I take it as a challenge to make sure that I don't have 9 people that, are not in business after a couple of years.
Right, right. Yep, I can see that. So one quick thing. So tell me about the chainsaw stuff.
Oh, yeah. Everybody has like their social media posts. And I've kind of really just generically just dumbed down my posts, not because I just think that social media is connecting with people or people just kind of resonates with them. And so when I was a kid, when I was growing up, I and one of my best friends, we had both had chainsaws. He had a pickup truck, and then we had log splitters and just hand splitters, no mechanical ones. And we would go out on a weekend and we knew people who had river bottom land with trees that were dead. And so we would cut them up and we would deliver wood on Saturdays and Sundays. And we were teenagers and we did really well. It wasn't uncommon for in the wintertime, we were splitting wood to just each of us after our expenses to make $250 to $300.
Oh, wow.
We're talking about back in 1977, 78. So that was big money, then.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
And so it's kind of like a wood tick. It's one of those things that you just really enjoyed because you learned it all. And so I still, well, as a matter of fact, yesterday, at my wife, where my wife keeps her horse, one of the trees had fallen in one of the pens. And she said, "Hey, can you bring your chainsaw out?" I was excited because I just love the opportunity to get my chainsaw out. And I live on an acreage that has 100 some trees, and invariably there's dead ones here and there. So I just kind of prune them, take them out, and it makes for great bonfires, right? So that's all good. I like doing bonfires too. And I'm also a big advocate of, I like, doing the smoker. I like grilling, having people over. I mean, all those things that's what life is supposed to be about.
Absolutely.
So when someone says, "Where are you going on vacation?" I typically say my backyard. So it's all good. And then I occasionally, not as much as I like, I grew up riding motorcycles. And so I'm leaving here in a couple of days, going out to La Crosse, Wisconsin with our shrine group. Because as a Shriner, we have a Midwest Shrine Association. So we're going out there to partake in that. So I'm looking forward to getting on a motorcycle and taking a ride down the highway.
Nice.
I should be that's heading east. I should be heading west because Sturgis
I was
is
going to
this
say, I
week.
thought you were going to say Sturgis too.
I've been to Sturgis many times and I'd love it. And if I wasn't doing this, the Midwest Shrine, I probably would be going out there because my brother, he also is a big motorcycle rider. So we just love riding together and that sort of thing. But I also know that riding motorcycle can sometimes cause problems too, because I was riding a dirt bike here about 5 weeks ago, and I ungraciously dismounted and landed on a pile of rocks and broke 3 ribs. And so, but I'm not quite ready for bubble wrap yet. So I guess I'll just keep going and doing all these things. But no, real estate's been great. I really, really love what I do. And yes, there makes for some long days. And I think that's the other part where when you're talking about agents who are looking at getting into the business, just know that it's a little bit of a commitment, and your spouse has to be. If you're married and kids, they understand it too, because it's like it's pretty hard to tell a client that they worked all day and they want to go out and look at houses at 6 o'clock. Well, you have to go if you're going to go do it, or have a team members you can leverage that are willing to help you, with that also.
Absolutely. All right, Tony. So can you tell everyone out there what's the best way to reach you if they have any further questions or want to know more about the real estate in the Sioux Falls area?
Sure. Yeah. All right. My cell number is 605-201-5998. And I'm a big advocate of text messaging, because it just, in our days where we're constantly having conversations with people, all these different appointments, that sort of thing, text messages, I do hit those, and I do make sure that I'm calling people back or replying as soon as possible. And then we have cbempirerealty.com is our website. We also have a Facebook page, Coldwell Banker Empire Realty, which is a great way to access and contact us also. So, but, I just know that being in the business here I'm coming up on 16 years in September, and it's gone by really quickly. It's amazing. It's hard to even imagine 16 years already, but I love working with clients, whether it's buyers or sellers, or helping team members. So there's a lot of satisfaction in what we do.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here today, Tony, on the Local Lens. And thanks to all of you out there for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Jamie.
That wraps up this episode of The Local Lens. Thanks for tuning in and exploring South Dakota with me. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review to help us reach more listeners. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and more community highlights. Until next time, keep discovering, connecting, and thriving.